As a person who loves the finer things, this holiday season, I've asked for a luxurious new Buick SUV. Fingers crossed.
Ring in the holidays with Buick. Get up to 20% below MSRP on most 2017 luxury SUV models. That's almost $7,400 on this Buick Enclave leather. Experience the new Buick this holiday season for remaining 2017s.
The perfect gift sale at Joseph A. Bank. All Traveler and Executive Sport coats $149. All Pima cotton sweaters $3 for $99. Plus, buy one, get one free on almost everything in store. The perfect gift sale, only at Joseph A. Bank.
Mission to show drip coffee drinkers it's time to wake up to Keurig.
Wakey, wakey, rise and shine.
How are you? Well, watch this. I pop that in there, press brew, that's it.
So rich.
I love it.
That's why you should be a Keurig man.
Full-bodied.
Are you sure you're describing the coffee and not me?
Introducing Cologuard.
I'm here for an important reason. Colon cancer screening. If you're age 50 or older and at average risk, Cologuard finds cancer and precancer. And it's a non-invasive test you can use at home. In fact, I'm as easy as get, go, gone. How do you get me? Your doctor orders me, and I'm delivered directly to your doorstep. There's no need for time off or special prep because I use the DNA in your stool to find colon cancer. Then you just go. I mean, collect your sample. Then I'm gone. Just ship me to the lab. Gotta go.
Cologuard is intended for individuals at average risk for colon cancer. Cologuard is not for high-risk individuals, including those with a history of colon cancer or polyps, IBD, certain hereditary cancer syndromes, or a family history of colon cancer. Cologuard, colon cancer screening that's as easy as get, go, gone. Ask your doctor if Cologuard is right for you.
Golden Corral Smokehouse keeps on rolling. New smoked beef short ribs, honey chipotle shrimp, baby back ribs, and more. But if you want to rock the salad bar, hit it. The Smokehouse at Golden Corral. Your choice rules.
So that goal you've been saving for, you can do it.
We can do this.
At Fidelity, our online planning tools are clear and straightforward, so you can plan for retirement while saving for the things you want to do today.
Remember how the economic crash was supposed to be a wake-up call for our government? People all across the country lost their savings, their pensions, and their jobs. I'm Tom Steyer, and it turned out that the system that had benefited people like me who were well off was in fact stacked against everyone else. It's why I left my investment firm and resolved to use my savings for the public good. But here we are 9 years later, and this president and the Republican Congress are making a bad situation even worse. They won't tell you that their so-called tax reform plan is really for the wealthy and big corporations while hurting the middle class. It blows up the deficit, and that means fewer investments in education, healthcare, and job creation. It's up to all of us to stand up to this president, not just for impeachable offenses, but also to demand a country where everyone has a real chance to succeed. Join us. Your voice matters.
You went to France to be a missionary while guys were dying in rice paddies in Vietnam.
I was up to my knees in rice paddies with guns, and then we're going up against Charlie, slugging it out with him.
You have the guts to get on the stage of a man that served in Vietnam?
I did not watch my buddies die face down in the muck so that this trumpet, this could waltz around
Vietnam, man.
Well, there isn't a literal connection.
No, Walter, face it, there isn't any connection.
Oh my God. That's pretty good. Joining us now, Director of Polling at Harvard's Institute of Politics and founder and CEO of Social Sphere, Inc., John Della Volpe. Very good to have you back on the show.
So John
is still with us.
Mika and I are always asked, as everybody else is always asked, what's going on? Wait. Why has America turned in this direction, and are we doomed for... I said, listen, this is going to... It's like the Matrix. Right. They're going to look back on Donald Trump as an anomaly, but an anomaly of the worst kind. Demographics is destiny. This will forever be remembered as an anomaly that represented the death cry of an aging white America, dead and buried forever.
I think
your polling shows it, does it?
It does. It shows a couple of significant things, Joe. Number one, 2/3 of this generation, the largest generation we've been talking for a long time in the history of America, now it's the largest generation in the electorate because every millennial beginning in 2018 will be eligible to vote. So there's more of them than baby boomers won. And 2/3 of them have significant fear about the future. And like you said, I think what we will see in 2020, the counter to populism, will be a millennial-centric movement where they will turn this fear into fuel and tip over every institution that doesn't bring them in.
Wow. Joanna, we've had a lot of discussions about millennials. Does this match?
We have, Mika, we have.
Well,
my great concern is that, according to your poll too, only 34% say they will definitely vote. So none of this matters if you can't motivate them to get to the ballot box. And if I were in Silicon Valley, I would be spending a huge amount of time figuring out how people who can pay for everything online can vote online too, because otherwise I fear they will not express themselves. And what happened in Brexit, and we saw what happened here too, but 85% of people over the age of 65 voted for Brexit, and only 34% of millennials voted.
That's right. We can see what happens when they do vote. Virginia happens, right? We had twice as many young people vote in Virginia than they did 8 years ago, and we know what happened.
So we're talking about them being more engaged. Now we're looking at how they'll be engaged, and you have almost 2/3 in your poll prefer a Democratic majority to a Republican majority. Is that broadly reflective of where millennials are in their politics? Are there many more? Are there twice as many Democrats among millennials as there are Republicans?
No, there are more independents in the members of either party, Willie. And 75% of millennials, or the 18 to 29 millennials we talk to, are not strong supporters of either party.
Right.
So given the choices today, as you said, 2/3 to 1/3 prefer Democrats. It's a bigger number than it was 4 years ago at this time. Democrats are more motivated this year for sure.
So the fuel that you're talking about, the fuel that millennials feel, you mentioned the phrase tipping over institutions. What institutions would they be intent on tipping over that haven't been tipped over already?
I think government. I'm tracking from Southeast Asia throughout Europe, potentially here in the U.S., to have basically kind of we've been talking about kind of the wolf being at the door. And this is a moment where I think we need some more top-down leadership to really engage people on these generational issues. Tax reform is a great example. Gun control is another great example. This isn't a 50-50 country. This is a 2/3, 1/3 generation. And they can do it online. They can raise $1 billion online if they had some leadership. I think it's coming.
Donald Trump, it's interesting, since elected, it was never really popular with millennials, but what support he had, even among young Republicans, he's lost 12 percentage points in this poll, sitting at 25%.
And where I think most of that deficit comes from, Joe, this is just in the last 6 months, it comes from his performance on race-related issues. It's the lowest mark overall, and specifically among young Republicans, that's where they give him the lowest ratings.
Do you have any sense, John, and I know it's not in your numbers here, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but the willingness of some millennials to actually be engaged to the point where they run for office? Because that, to me, is the next step. It's one thing to get in the process and to vote, but they want to have somebody who looks like them, who thinks like them, who sees the world the way they do.
Who needs a mental health day like they do?
Well, right, perhaps. But do you hear more millennials wanting to get engaged in the process?
I do, especially from millennial-minded service members. You know, Joseph Kopser in Texas, and there's, I don't know, maybe a dozen or so young men and women who served in the military who are now turning into public service. Of course, Seth Moulton in Massachusetts is another great example of that. And by the way, you know, we'll have 3 or 4 potential heads of state in Europe in their late 30s or early 40s. It's only a matter of time.
Well, you have Justin Trudeau in Canada, right, who's very appealing to them.
Exactly.
So over the past 70 years or so, after 75 years after the West and the world defeated Nazism, we grew up, I think all of us grew up, with an overriding fear of the Soviets, of the Cold War, of fallout shelters, of what was coming. Your poll shows that the majority of millennials think the greatest threat comes from inside the country. Something, remember that famous Abraham Lincoln quote that the great empires of Europe couldn't take a drink from the Ohio River unless we gave them permission, but we can destroy ourselves from within? Seems like millennials are channeling Lincoln here.
And that was a major objective of what our students want to understand is what are our values and what are our threats. We found, again, 2/3 to 1/3, young people believe the greatest threats come from inside, not outside the country. We had over 1,000 individual responses we followed up. We found out that it includes Donald Trump, includes a sense of disharmony in America, racism in ourselves for allowing this to happen.
So they're looking within.
They are.
Not just at the president.
At this point, they are.
Because a lot of millennials I speak to are just beside themselves about this president.
Well, and also they're the most racially diverse generation too, right? So they personally take on, I mean, it says they have a 22%, Trump has a 22% approval rating for race relations, how he handles them, and they feel it personally.
Almost 8 out of 10 people consider race a serious concern. 7 out of 10 African Americans in this country, 46% of Hispanics are very concerned about feeling under attack on an everyday basis in this country.
So looking at all these numbers, what does this mean about what the state of the Democratic Party is, Joe? Because it seems like the table is set.
I think it's the state of the parties. I think the parties are dying. They really are dying. The Republican Party is dying. Alabama will be a death blow. The Democrats somehow, remarkably, have no cogent answer, no program to put this back in. I mean, our children grow up with these. I want to buy something. I'm not going out. I'm just going to go to Amazon and buy whatever I want to buy. Why in the world do you have to choose between Democrats and Republicans when you have
Alexa, give me a president?
Yeah, right. Alexa, give me this. Alexa, that. Give me that. I mean, the framework is being blown to pieces. It's only a matter of time, and I would be shocked if we didn't have an independent president in the next 10 years. Right. Shocked.
Why would this be the only industry that doesn't transform over the last dozen or so years because of technology?
Right, so what you're seeing is disruption in the political process, and probably the god of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, will end up running, right? Everybody says he's going to run. That will be the latte president.
And on paper, things look so good for Democrats. They should. But again, only 1 in 3 young people believe the Democratic Party cares about them.
Were you able to pick up in all of these surveys, the combined surveys that you've done, are there 1 or 2 nagging fears that millennials live with? I mean, they might be different from the fears that we older people live with.
I think the overall fear is tied, Mike, to kind of the feeling that there's just not an equal chance for everyone to work hard. It's essentially going back to the American dream. I don't want to use the term political rigging, because that's a little bit of a political, almost partisan term now, but the idea of fairness is all that young people are looking for. If they do well in school, they want to have an opportunity to get a job in the city or town that they care about and work through that process. And inequality, I think, is something that connects Democrats as well as Republicans.
Your point about millennials being more independent, I think would extend. I'm not a millennial. I'm older. I think I'm Generation X. I never quite know, but I think it extends. I think it extends even a little older, where people look and they say, "Why would I blindly go down a ballot and vote for someone based on an R or D next to their name? I'm going to take the measure of the candidate. I'm going to see what they believe. If it lines up with enough of my beliefs, I'm willing to vote for that person." So, what kind of a candidate do you think these millennials you talk to are looking for, let's say in 2020, in a presidential candidate?
Yeah, because they don't need an R or D. They're used to getting what they want.
And right, the unbundling of politics, I think, is what they're looking for. They're looking for someone who empowers them. So think about 3 or 4 different kind of characteristics, one of which is who actually asks people what they think to create a policy or a platform potentially online by the best ideas of everyone, right? One. Second is one who inspires them to actually talk to their friends and neighbors, to have a conversation about politics. And they may not 100% agree with your position, and that's okay, but to encourage civil discourse, to recognize. We had a fascinating section of this poll where we took away the names of the presidents, but we shared key statements from everyone. 2/3 of millennials agree with what Bill Clinton said in the 90s and what Obama said during his presidency, which is 1, we're a nation of immigrants, right? 2 is we need to have a civic reawakening in this country or we'll lose the American dream. A candidate that embodies those principles and does it online and empowers people.
Well, and they sort of had that candidate in Bernie Sanders, right? Did you ask them about Bernie Sanders now?
We haven't asked him about Sanders in a little while, but clearly he was the millennial candidate by far last time. We'll see what happens in the next couple of years.
Let's move around for final thoughts. Mike?
John, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Well, you know, I mean, we're talking about fears that millennials have. I keep wondering, the more you talk to people, a lot of people wonder if the country is suffering so much damage right now, will we ever be able to repair the damage that's being done today?
Mm-hmm. I worry.
We're 6 days away from that election in the state of Alabama. We'll be down there on election day. And as I think we've all said for the last several weeks, the people in the media, the people in New York and Washington who are presuming because of his past that Roy Moore will lose are mistaken, and that this race is up for grabs right now. It's a coin toss.
I think this race is going to be it is going to be a deciding moment for the Republican Party. Obviously, it'll help Democrats if Roy Moore gets elected, but that might be a short-term gain because, again, talking on the topic of millennials and voting, I think it's only a matter of time until there is a massive disruption in American politics and parties get blown to pieces.
It's an incredible time. I'm looking at Time Magazine's Person of the Year, the Silence Breakers, and I do think we're witnessing a sea change, and I hope there'll be ripple effects, ripples across the water, all across corporate America, not just in the big fancy businesses, and that it's not a tsunami and blows back and hurts women.
It's just very validating for people who've been complaining about it for 10, 15 years and weren't listened to. Nobody believed them. Now to be believed, huge.
You have 5 seconds.
I think the counter to populism is this cover, and we'll see the same thing happening. Voice of the people's coming.
That does it for us this morning. Thanks so much for being with us. Stephanie Rule picks up the coverage right now.
Thanks so much, Mika. Thanks, Joe. Hi there. I'm Stephanie Rule. This morning, a capital move. Hours from now, President Trump will recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, fulfilling one part of a key campaign promise.
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
And right now, Israel prepares for violence as Middle East leaders rip the decision.
It will be the end of the peace process.
Under scrutiny, President Trump's son, Don Jr., on his way to the Hill for a closed-door meeting with the House Intel Committee. This, as documents exclusively obtained by NBC News reveal Don Jr. asked Russians for damning information on the Clinton Foundation. And rage against the machine. The race in Alabama gets even uglier as Steve Bannon goes off at an event for Roy Moore.
And now I'm going to get personal.
We begin this morning with President Trump's big decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, a move that breaks with 70 years of U.S. policy and one that Palestinians and others say could destroy hopes of Middle East peace once and for all. Well, I got a great team here to break it all down. But before we get to them, I want to explain why this city is so very important. Jerusalem sits at the center, literally and figuratively, of nearly 70-year-old dispute between Israelis and Palestinians, and a much older, broader conflict between Muslims and Jews. The city is holy to 3 religions. For Christians, as the site of Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection. For Muslims, as the place where the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. For Jews, as their ancestral home dating back thousands of years. Sites holy to both Jews and Muslims are located in East Jerusalem, including the Western Wall, the Dome of the Rock, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Israel claimed East Jerusalem in 1967, but most nations have refused to recognize the move. Palestinians want it as the capital of a future state. Right now, its legal status is up in the air, and for decades, the international community has treated Jerusalem as disputed territory. But that ends today. This afternoon, President Trump is expected to break with tradition, formally recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. He also wants to move the U.S. embassy there, but won't do it immediately. The backlash has already been swift and comes from all over the globe. Leaders from Pope Francis to Vladimir Putin, as well as heads of Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, say this decision could plunge the region into chaos. Not surprisingly, protests erupted shortly after the news broke, and Palestinians have announced 3 days of rage beginning today. Leaders there say the peace process as we know it is dead.
It would put an obstacle to the peace process. Maybe it will be the end of the peace process.
I want to start with NBC's chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, live in Jerusalem. Richard, what's the mood there? What's the level of concern?
Well, there is a sense of history. The mood is really split. If you ask Israelis, they're incredibly excited about this moment. They think that this is something that is not just a long time coming, but millennia coming. They are going to be erecting big screens here in Jerusalem. They're going to be watching President Trump's speech. The mayor is holding special festivities. For the Palestinians, there is a sense of depression that the Oslo peace process, the peace process that they thought was going to bring them a state one day, and that they hoped to put at least part of Jerusalem at the capital of that state. They think that process didn't work. They think that it is effectively over, and they're feeling very despondent. There have been some protests so far. They're expected to get a lot bigger. Frankly, it's been raining today. It was hailing just a short while ago. That has slowed things down. But mostly people want to actually see the president's speech. They want to watch it themselves. The Palestinian authorities have been calling for demonstrations after the speech because they want to see the tone. They want to see exactly what he's going to say. President Trump has a reputation for not always saying what he's expected to say. So we will see how that comes. But there is a feeling here that the U.S. is trying to decide something that is deeply historic, deeply profound, and that this is not going to be the end of this dispute. You said earlier that this is going to be the end. I think maybe for the U.S. administration this will be some clarity, but if you just mentioned all those other countries that don't agree with this policy, this is going to be remain an open dispute.
All right, Richard, I can hear the rain coming down. You better get inside. I want to turn to NBC's Peter Alexander at the White House. Peter, why now? What's behind the decision?
Well, Stephanie, to be clear, this goes against decades of precedents, obviously, within the United States, recognizing Jerusalem was supposed to be the ultimate reward for Israel. It's not clear that Israel has done anything in return for this gift right now. For all the backlash we've already heard, we are hearing from the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, this morning, who in effect is saying that the president remains committed to the peace process, to listen to his words carefully today as he speaks. Tillerson basically saying there remains a very good opportunity for peace to be achieved there right now. Getting a call from a source. I'll answer that right after we speak. U.S. officials are telling us that the president recently expressed, as it was described, serious frustration that he would not be following through on his campaign promise to move the embassy, and that his inner circle went about creating ways for the president to sort of appear to follow through while still signing that waiver. That means not moving the embassy right now. Officials tell us both Tillerson and James Mattis, the defense secretary, had voiced concerns that the threat by doing this, moving the embassy, would create for U.S. personnel from both agencies stationed in the region. Here's what candidate Trump said to the American Israel lobby during the campaign.
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem. And we will send a clear signal that there is no daylight between America and our most reliable ally, the State of Israel.
Also, for noting, we are now hearing that Theresa May, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, has said that she will be speaking to President Trump to express her concerns about this, saying that the situation regarding Jerusalem should be part of a settlement regarding the Israelis and Palestinians and should not be done unilaterally. Stephanie?
All right, Peter Alexander, such a baller, getting a call from a source while you're doing a hit. I'm going to let you take that call and bring in my panel. Heidi Prisbilla, White House reporter for USA Today. Richard Stengel served as Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs under President Obama. And Joel Benenson was a senior strategist for President Obama. All three MSNBC political analysts. Richard, I'm going to go to you first. Why does this matter? The United States recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel doesn't mean the rest of the world does. Then why is it so significant?
It's really significant because, in effect, it's kind of the end of this two-state process, which Netanyahu has always gone back and forth on. What's happened in these negotiations all these years is that Jerusalem was always saved for last because it was the trickiest part. That land swap in the West Bank, that's easy, child's play compared to Jerusalem. Jerusalem, as you said in your great beginning, it's the home of the three Abrahamic religions. It's so tense for people. So what this really does is it sets back the peace process by decades, and also it probably brings a lot of violence, and it alienates our other allies. Look at President Trump. His first trip was to Saudi Arabia. The king of Saudi Arabia called Donald Trump and said not to do this. So this makes this whole Middle East thing much more complicated and dangerous.
That's a good point. Heidi, give us the upside downside of this decision.
The upside is basically a pure political decision. We're trying to ask ourselves this morning why this would happen, because like Richard says, this was supposed to be the final payoff in terms of any final agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And it seems to be not only against what all of our allies are saying, both in the Muslim world and in Europe, but as well against the advice of some of the president's closest national security advisors, including Mattis. Like Richard said, those settlements in the East, that's nothing compared to this giveaway. And yet Mattis himself is on the record calling those settlements creating apartheid, and saying that the United States pays a great price for doing this. So that brings you back to the political calculation here. If this is a president who is basically ticking through some of his campaign promises and doing it in a way that is against what our allies are warning us against and against what his closest national security advisors are saying. At the same time, if you do talk to senior administration officials, they think that this is immaterial to the peace process, and that this is already, U.S. law already recognizes this decision. But again, the crucial caveat there was that we recognize this as part of any final settlement between the Israelis and the Palestinians as a final agreement.
Then, Joel, is there any indication this fits into a achieving peace in the Middle East strategy, or is it strictly pleasing domestic supporters, some domestic supporters?
No, it will not help achieve peace, and I think also politically it